The movie we'll be talking about today was made a half-century ago. Back in them days, you couldn't order things off the internet, especially to an island off the coast of Scotland. So these characters in this film would be lost if they were magically able to hear what we're about to discuss for the next 90 seconds or so. But these Summerisle zealots are stuck in their own crazy world anyway, and wouldn't much care about what we're selling, unless it was an orchard full of apples. But it's not apples. It's Sparkplug coffee. Sparkplug is the freshest, fairly traded, premium Arabica beans in all of Canada. You can snag some decaf, or you can just ease off on the jolt a bit by choosing some half-calf. In fact, the Sparksters provide a wide, I bet they love being called the Sparksters, provide a wide assortment of roasts and blends, and they've even got a choice of seasonal blends. They place this excellent stuff in the mailbox or on the porch of people in the United States and, of course, Canada. That will happen within a week. And guess what, fellow Canadians? You will get free shipping. But hey, why not become a member of the Autopilot Coffee Club? That gets you all kinds of perks, and you can take advantage of deals that some fickle, yeah, but I want to be a firebug and kill a cop from the mainland type maniacs will not get. And you non-maniacs will save money on every order. Oh, heads up, you can customize to get your orders when it suits your needs. So if you're off on assignment, or maybe away for the rest of your life, you can pause or even flat out cancel your membership. That'll be the priority if you're this guy in this situation. My coffee membership should have been canceled before I came to this island. So don't be calling this a Coffee of the Month Club. Sparkplug.coffee/HYES is what you need to be typing. Using our HYES promo code will save you 20% off your next order, whether you're brand new to this or if you've been buying your Sparkplug for a while, but haven't previously used our promo code. Anyway, it's time to talk about our movie of the day. Andrew Luther, please cue up your eerie tunes and play us in.
And action!
Have you ever seen The Wicker Man? Hi, you wee barons. Is that what they call them in Scotland? Barons? Anyway.
Babies. That's what you call babies, right?
Wee barons.
Wee barons.
And thank you oh so much for downloading, streaming, or YouTubing the 544th, 544, that's the number, Raging Fire of the Classic Movies podcast we call Have You Ever Seen? We venture back into the past and do spoiler-laden reviews of films of yore on Mondays and every other Friday. Who is this fellow who is speaking to you? Why, I'm the pious authority figure who's in way over his head and barely fights back when someone plops him in a place he's meant to die. He really doesn't try that hard to get out of that Wicker Man, does he? Ryan Ellis. And here's the apple-loving Celtic pagan who enjoys singing and dancing by the campfire, my wife, Bev.
That's me.
With clothes on, though, in your case.
Well, depends where the campfire is.
Right. Of course, at that point in the movie, they were wearing clothes. It's probably pretty chilly right by the water there in Scotland, where they actually were. It was an island off the coast of Scotland, and probably never that warm there. Maybe the dead of summer. This is only the spring, though, so it probably wasn't that warm. In reality, when they're filming,
Well, they shot it in the fall. They couldn't get the location in spring. I can't remember why. They wanted to shoot it in the spring, but they had to shoot it in the fall, and they had to cover up the leaves and put fake flowers on trees and stuff to make it look like this spring.
That covered Halloween, when was that? 2 weeks ago. Same issue. They shot it in California as well, and it was the spring. Yeah, it's a October 31st movie set in Illinois. Okay, the coming attractions trivia for this week's movie, The Wicker Man. Name the other Edward Woodward movie, say that 3 times fast, we've reviewed where there's a cult that kills people. He's not in the cult in this case, but he was in that case. What's the movie?
It was Hot Fuzz.
Mm-hmm. He's Tom Weaver in that, the professor who gets exploded by that sea mine in the police station at the end. And the way that Simon Pegg plays Nicholas Angel in Hot Fuzz has got to be an homage to how Woodward plays Howie in this. And their look is pretty similar, too. Pegg is funny, but his style, especially early on, is so similar to the way
Just
Woodward
like
plays
a joyless scold, yeah.
Woodward's good in this movie, but if he was a real person, you wouldn't want to be around him.
Oh, that's intentional, though.
Yeah. And by the way, maybe you've already heard it in Bev's voice, but she's still battling this cold after all this time. It's been many weeks. You're probably going to hear some struggles in the throat here today, as there was last week when we did Nope.
Smooth.
Okay, Anthony Schaffer's The Wicker Man was released going on 50 years ago in the UK on December 6th, 1973, although it didn't roll out worldwide until the following year. By the way, I think that pronunciation's correct because I remember when his brother, Peter Schaffer, did a commentary or maybe a making of or something on Amadeus, and that's how it was pronounced. But Bev, the plots of most 50-year-old motion pictures aren't uppermost on everyone's mind, so please give us the skinny on The Wicker Man and tell us what this thing is all about.
Following up on an anonymous tip, a staunchly religious police sergeant, Howie, travels to a remote Scottish island to investigate the case of a missing child. Strange residents of the island give Howie the runaround, and he is shocked to discover that they have abandoned Christianity and worship the old pagan gods. Through persistence, Howie discovers that the missing girl is still alive and being prepared to be sacrificed to ensure a bountiful harvest. But he's been tricked. The girl was just the bait all along, and he's the one getting burned alive inside a giant wooden man, surrounded by the singing residents.
Yeah, it had to be that the guy who's going to be sacrificed had to have free will. He had to go there of his own free will, which he does. Had to have the power of the king. He's the law, so they stretched that one a little bit. Had to be a virgin. I don't know if they confirmed for sure he's a virgin, despite his piousness.
I think the point is
and one more thing, he had to be a fool.
Which he dresses like a fool, but I guess that's all part of the setup.
Mm-hmm.
And he is a fool because he got fooled by them.
Mm-hmm.
The virginity, everything I read about it, it's more or less confirmed by the fact that he's so staunchly against sex before marriage, and he's engaged, he's never been married. And the landlord's daughter, Willow, tries unsuccessfully to seduce him, and I think any red-blooded heterosexual man...
You wouldn't blame me if I was with Britt Eklund.
I wouldn't. There you go.
Nor would I blame you.
She's so hot. Yeah. She was Swedish, and they dubbed her... I bet they just cast her for her looks, as they should. Good Lord, that woman. Just 1 in a million.
Peter Sellers' wife at some point, maybe not at this point anymore. And apparently she was pregnant, so in the scene where she dances naked, the shots from behind her are apparently not her. The stunt double looks pretty great then, because I didn't even notice that. You just said she was dubbed. It was by Annie Ross, Laurie Singer's mother in Shortcuts, which we just covered a few months ago.
She was dubbed not because her acting was bad, but because she was Swedish. And she couldn't do a Scottish accent. Her accent was too strong, I guess. And there was a third actress that did the singing.
Yeah, right. So she was really layered in different ways, if you will. Even a stunt ass. Well, one thing that's curious about it, let's say she succeeded in seducing him. He doesn't have the 4 criteria anymore.
What do they do? Great point.
Why is she trying to do this?
I thought of this too. Well, they want to prove that he's a virgin. And I think they're toying with him too. And it's possible
they're a little cruel. Some of this is mean.
Oh, for sure.
This isn't just, we have to kill you, sorry. They are glorying in the fact they're killing him.
They're kind of enjoying it. Obviously, like the way the school children even are laughing at him. They all know his fate, and they are all amused by it.
The movie's not really scary until, it's not even scary at the end, I wouldn't say, but the way that they're so happy about the fact they're sending a person, and all these animals, but we kill animals all the time, so we can't be, oh my God, I'll kill those chickens.
We typically don't burn them alive.
And we don't laugh at them as we do it, or the person. Okay, back to the nutshell. Let's do that. So, the Wicker Man, in a nutshell. Investigator opposes island itinerary. Bah! Burn the bloody bastard! Or, Midspring. Midsommar was certainly inspired by this movie.
Oh, yeah, you could say that again. It's almost like a spiritual sequel. Or a spiritual remake, I should say.
Some rock star, I forget who it is now, some big name from the 70s, probably saw this movie in the theater at the time. Who was it? Such a huge fan of this movie. A lot of people are, but it isn't McCartney or something like that. But it's a big name who just loves The Wicker Man. It's a good movie. I think it's one of his favorites, though. Great story when I can't remember his name. Okay, the numbers on The Wicker Man. The Rotten Tomatoes reviews are great. 90% of critics like the film. The average is 8 out of 10. There are 61 reviews on the site, and 82% of audiences. The 2006 version, the Neil LaBute one with Nicolas Cage, the bass, my eyes, is at 15% and 17% from the critics and audiences, while The Wicker Tree, Robin Hardy's third film, he only made 3 in his entire life, is at 20% and 10%. So really, in a way, it's worse in one way, the audiences, and barely better than LaBute's version with the critics on Rotten Tomatoes. I never saw it. I never even heard of it until I was looking it up for this movie. But apparently it's a spiritual sequel. It's not really truly a sequel. And Christopher Lee is in that, but he's not supposed to be that character according to him. Lee said this was his favorite movie of anything he ever made. This is a guy that was in Lord of the Rings, all 6 of those. Wasn't he in The Hobbits as well? But definitely the 3 Lord of the Rings films as Saruman. No, sorry, he's only really in 2 because it's the director's cut of the 3rd one. A scene they probably should have left in, except that movie was already so long in the first place. So, okay, 2 Lord of the Rings movies, really. And he was in the Star Wars prequels, or at least 2 of those. I think it's Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. He was Dracula around this time frame. And so many other things that he was in. Yeah, this is the movie that stands out the most to him. And I think he said he would either do it for free or he did do it for free. As for this movie's rewards, it was the winner of the Saturn for Best Horror Film in 73, but got no Oscar nominations of any kind. And by the way, in 1973, I just did this on Friday, was The Exorcist. You would think that would have won the Saturn Award for the Best Horror Film of the year. And then movie magazines like Cinefantastique and Total Film just rave about this. I don't know if the reviews are recent, but they love it. Like that rock star, I can't remember the name of. loves this movie a lot.
But it had a disastrous rollout. It didn't really make that much money in the theater.
I couldn't find evidence of how much it actually made. I don't know.
Well, it was played as a B film in the States. This is crazy. It was a B film, and you know what the A film was that it played with? Don't Look Now.
Right, which I thought about doing this month.
Imagine seeing that double feature. 2 films that are now considered 2 of the greatest films ever made.
Definitely in the horror genre.
Okay, but I hear Don't Look Now thrown around all the time as one of the greatest films ever made.
Pretty good
Wicker
ending
Man,
as well.
Lots of people's favorite movies, not just this mysterious rock star that you made up out of thin air. But lots of people really love
Joey Ramone, all right? There's a name. What should be Joey Ramone? Somebody's going to email me.
Yeah.
You're right. That's the name you should have said 10 minutes earlier, dummy.
Certainly when people make lists of the greatest horror films of all time, Wicker Man is not even just on the list. It's in the top 20. People really love this movie, rightfully so.
I saw LaBute's version again maybe 3-4 weeks ago. It isn't very good, but it is more fun. Not that I don't like this movie. As always, Cage has given it his all. And I do take some issue with the criticisms of his performance, especially in that climax when they shatter his legs. They break them so he can't get out of the Wicker Man, which also makes sense. Woodward doesn't try at all to get out of this thing, including when the big guy throws him into it. You think he'd be scratching and clawing at him the best he can? Yeah, the guy would knock him out maybe, but...
Praying.
Yes, Christ, oh God. I love that ironic choice of words, of course, because he is a Christian calling for them to help, and they're not going to, yet these other people that don't believe anymore are just simply overpowering him and getting what they want.
It's saying something, isn't it?
Where's your Messiah now, Flanders?
Well, yeah, exactly. Where's your Messiah now? It's obviously not very flattering portrait of a pious man. And in the end, his piety gets him burnt alive.
Yeah.
Summerisle says, you'll get what you want. You'll die as a martyr. But he's not a martyr. He's not dying for his religion. He's not being persecuted for his religion. He's just in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's not a true martyrdom.
Right.
And I think he either knows that, or maybe he doesn't. Maybe he believes this is a martyr's death, and that's why he's calmly accepting it.
Well, he's still yelling at them from the Wicker Man, as Cage does in the other version. But what makes sense for LaBute to do is that first you shatter the guy's legs, which they don't do in this movie. And then, yes, the bees, he's allergic to bees, so then he's even more immobilized. So he's not going to get out of there. But Howie doesn't really try. And if you're saying that maybe he's accepting it, I don't think he is, though.
Yeah. I have to mention this before we move on from Nicolas Cage. I've never seen the LaBute version. And all I could think after seeing this movie is, who made the terrible mistake of getting Nicolas Cage to be in the Wicker Man and not casting him as Lord Summerisle?
In that, it's a woman.
It's a woman. Isn't it the whole island is all strictly women?
Yes, because LaBute is, if he's not really a misogynist, LaBute, his movies sure make it seem like he is. Because Ellen Burstyn, who is the Summerisle character, not Lord, obviously, and the women in that movie are awful, and you want to see him hurt them in a way. He punches one, I think, in the face or something like that, and I know it's a terrible thing to say, but, well, they do deserve it. These people deserve to be punched too, all the women and everything else. The fact that, again, it's not just that they're doing this because they want to save, in that case it's honey, here it's apples. They're trying to save themselves, but to be this happy about it is the real problem here.
To be so cheerful when they commit not just murder, burning someone alive. That's
and like
a wild
says,
way to kill anybody.
Like he says, they'll be coming for you next year, Lord, if this doesn't work. Or even if it does, what about next year's drought and next year's problems? You're going to sacrifice and kill somebody else?
So let's get into a question that burns up the internet when you look at people and what they talk about when it comes to this movie. I believe that villagers are true believers.
Yeah.
Is Lord Summerisle a true believer? His grandfather was a scientist.
Yeah.
So it was science, it was rational thinking that actually turned the island into this great orchard that they all prospered from. Right. But it wasn't because they worshipped the old gods. No. It was because a very smart person knew what to do to make that happen through rational thinking and scientific process. He knows that. And he benefits from everybody worshiping these pagan gods and belonging to, let's just call it a cult, because it is.
They are a cult.
Belonging to this cult, and he's their cult leader. He's this charismatic leader. So when Howie turns to him and says, this is going to be you in the Wicker Man next year, do you think that strikes any fear in his heart? Now, of course, I think if he needed to sacrifice someone again next year, it wouldn't be him. His followers wouldn't sacrifice him. They would find someone else to sacrifice, maybe 2 people this time. Or they say, oh, I guess he wasn't a virgin after all.
Look what they do in Midsommar. There are 2 guys willingly that go into that hut. There's a lot of guys that are burned alive. I don't think any women are in there.
No, there's only 3 that are burned alive. There's a few corpses that are in there with them.
Oh, you're right. Okay, yeah, they're already dead.
Yeah, and they're both very serenely accepting their fate, actually happy to go up in flames.
But I bring it up because maybe on this island, there might be a person that would do the same thing.
I totally agree.
If it's to save everybody else. If somebody told me, and I was a true believer, if you died right now, even in this horribly painful way, I don't think it would last that long. You're burning. You're not going to live for too long like that. You think the smoke would probably knock somebody out or kill them before the fire even gets to them. Anyway, there might be somebody who's a true believer that would say, if I can save all of you, I would do it. It's like jumping in front of a bullet that's aimed for your lover's head or your dad's head or something. A lot of people, not everyone would, but yeah.
Soldiers do it.
And if you believe in this, what's the difference?
I think they believe in reincarnation in this particular cult, but you just have to tell somebody they're going to heaven. They'll be reincarnated as a prince. Whatever they want, whatever's like that dream fantasy scenario, well, of course you will get everything you want once you sacrifice yourself for the rest of your friends and family and be treated like a hero for the rest of their days, be remembered so well. Yeah, people do it for lesser reasons all the time, so 100% I believe that.
So we said David Koresh figure or a Donald Trump figure.
It's all the same kind of narcissistic
And you wonder if Koresh believed his crap or if Trump really truly believes a lot of his crap. I know he comes up a lot and people maybe get annoyed with this. We've had people that criticize us for getting political, whether they agree with Trump or not. Why would you believe in anybody as strongly as somebody believes in him? Nobody is worth the hype that he gives himself and that people have given him. Nobody, no matter how smart or great or awesome they are. It's absurd. I don't get it. But then that's what Lord Summerisle's got going on here. That's what David Koresh had. That's what any cult leader has.
There's a thing that makes Summerisle not make sense. I'm not going to nitpick this. They just made a movie the way they wanted it. But like in any population, you're going to have a spectrum where there are people who are going to be skeptical and there are people who are going to be gullible. And everybody's on one end or the other. But you're never going to keep an entire island convinced at all times. But how cults work is they constantly test you. And anybody who is skeptical falls off. And then
or they get killed.
They carry on without you. They get killed, but they get removed from the group in one way or another, and they just self-select the most gullible people. I shouldn't say gullible. Lots of smart people have fallen for cults. There's more to it than just that. But it takes a certain kind of personality. When you have those small groups where people are supposed to be born into this cult and die into this cult, and I know it's not a cult, but say someone like Mennonites, people who just live this extreme lifestyle, it takes a lot to keep people in, but they still lose members all the time. Or like fundamentalist Mormon groups. They still bleed members.
Look at Randy Quaid and Kingpin.
He was a loyal Amish man. What are you talking about? He's just bold.
He does smoke and drink as soon as he possibly can.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You can't have 100% loyal people all the time.
Right.
Midsommar does the same thing, where everybody is just so perfectly loyal and lockstep with one another. That's not really how any society is going to work, no matter how cloistered it is. But for the sake of the movie, everybody is loyal and lockstep and following everything Lord Summerisle says.
So do I think he is, I don't know if I really answered this, somebody who believes his own crap? I guess so. Maybe he's not as smart or as talented as he thinks he is, much like another cult leader we just talked about 2 minutes ago. Because no cult leader probably is that smart or that
just
virile
need to be really confident.
Yeah. I bring it up as I often do in this podcast. With great power comes great responsibility. And cult leaders don't show any of that. All right, we're deep into the podcast now. I think you liked the movie. Tell us what you thought.
Yeah, it's a great film. I knew I was going to love it.
You've never seen it before, though.
No, it took me way too long to get around to seeing it. It's been on my list forever. And to me, this holds up with the likes of Rosemary's Baby and The Exorcist. It's a great, elevated horror film of the 70s.
I thought you didn't like Exorcist.
I don't like The Exorcist. I just think this should be held in the same rank as The Exorcist.
And by the way, I'll push my glasses back that aren't on my face right now. Rosemary's Baby was 1968, babe. It's not the 70s.
Oh, my God.
What about the scares, though?
My apologies. It's not very scary.
No, at the end it gets creepy. The masks.
It's troubling. It's disturbing. It's not scary. It kept me up at night, but just thinking about... Not like in the way that The Conjuring kept me up at night because I was like, what's in the shadows? Yeah. Even though I just had that whole argument saying that, well, this isn't really realistic, that a group of people would be this consistently indoctrinated. Humans did burn people alive through a great chunk of our history. We're both Anglo-Saxon descent. We don't really know. Chances are pretty good that our ancestors were burning witches, burning infidels, and laughing and watching and celebrating.
Let me push the glasses back again. They didn't really burn witches back then. They just hang them or throw them off a cliff.
They did burn them. In Europe, they burned them. Not in America. In America, they were hung. Okay. Yeah. In Salem, they didn't burn witches. They hung them. The Tudor court, Henry VIII burned subjects alive on the regular.
It's funny you bring this up then, because this movie's not about witches. Did we cover any movies this month about witches? Conjuring isn't really that. Exorcist? No. Witchcraft is mentioned. But
The Conjuring, the ghost is the ghost of a witch, isn't it?
Oh, you're right.
It's not the witchiest movie of all time.
So no movies this month, though, other than that, I guess, is about witches per se. But the last shot, the last scene, of course, is him being burned. He finally does die, presumably, because he stops yelling. And then the very last shot of the whole film is the Wicker Man falling into view, but the sunset is there. That's
beautiful.
A great image.
Beautiful production design of the Wicker Man. To have a set piece like that is perfectly rendered, and to have the restraint to save it to the very end of the movie.
Yeah, well, that's what the movie's called, too.
Then the effect it has when you know that you're right at the crescendo of the film, that much greater to just see it there, to see the horror on his face, because somehow Howie knows right away once he sees it what's going to happen to him. Great moment.
So as the thing collapses out of view, and then all the animals and he would be burned alive, we don't know about the apples thing because we have to believe in the cult if we think it's actually going to work. But I guess they think it did. Makes you wonder what they do the next day.
It's an anomaly that their fruit didn't grow, right? Every other year we see pictures.
Howie says that it shouldn't grow there. It's illogical.
Yeah, but it has been growing there.
Maybe it's finally come to the point where the things can't grow the same way.
Yeah, the magical soil that his grandfather, who was long dead. We have a tree
that bloomed berries the first year we lived here. It didn't last year, and it is again this year. And I guess you've heard of this before. I never have. Where a tree gives off berries every other year. That's weird, too.
Yeah, we had a crabapple tree when I was growing up, and it only bloomed every second year. Farmers would know that. But lots of things can make a crop fail.
I like this, by the way, bring it back to your point about whether the Lord believes his own crap or not, Christopher Lee's character. Maybe he's incompetent. He's not incompetent at convincing them of, I am the man for you. God knows how many of these
and maybe
he's slept
things
with.
are going to fall apart. If year after year they keep sacrificing people and year after year their crop keeps failing, well then suddenly people are going to turn on him. And he will be the one put in the Wicker Man or some other horrible fate.
So the movie didn't scare us, but it did get to you that night. Much like Don't Look Now, it has that factor of there's that one scare, I think it's at the end of Don't Look Now, when Donald Sutherland finally sees the face of the little figure that's wearing the red raincoat, I guess. Has a hood on. Must be a raincoat. That's the one that I would say was inspired by with the sex scene where they're doing it, but then you cut back to them doing, in that case about a sight, it's the conversation at dinner. Well, not really dinner, I guess, but drinks in the bar. And we cut back and forth between that. And that was inspired by what happens in Don't Look Now with Sutherland and Julie Christie. But I don't remember that movie being all that scary either. That was probably scarier than this is. But this does have maybe 15 minutes at the end of horror in the sense of inevitability, I guess. But the fact that all these other people, the kids too, he's going out to his fate. If they just stood there with stone faces and stared at him, that would probably be creepy too.
Like some kind of Children of the Corn, creepy alien. But no, it is so much worse that they are singing and dancing.
And not that I want him to die, but one flaw with this movie, making him be so pious and so unlikable, is that it's hard to be as bothered by the fact, because Nicolas Cage is more of a person you want to hang around with in the remake. Like, two people come from, I think, the water, whatever it is. One of them's holding basically a grocery bag size bag. What's in the bag? A shark or something? How is there a shark inside the bag, you maniac?
Don't question Cage.
And apparently he and LeBeau were going for comedy, but it didn't work as a comedy. And I think that's also revisionist history on their part. But Howie's not somebody you really want to hang around with. So at the end, I don't feel as terrified for him as I would in, Midsommar. Everyone hates Christian except for, I don't really like Christian, but the fact that, I said this a couple years ago when we covered it, people were so happy, it seemed like. Way too many people that saw the movie were glad when he died. He's a bad boyfriend. He's a bad friend.
You and I continue to disagree.
He should not die.
I think at the very least, Ari Aster, he wants us to be complicit in it and then be horrified by our own complicity in the end.
Not enough people were horrified.
So maybe he failed. I would agree with you that maybe on some level he failed.
He's more sympathetic.
When I watched that movie, I was horrified that Christian was burning alive. No matter how much of a jerk he is, he's a pretty human jerk. He's a weak man, but does he deserve his fate?
He's more likable than Howie is.
At all. And Florence Pugh's character is out of her mind by the end. She has gone full tilt crazy. That's how I saw that. This is a bad ending. The bad guy won. It's just that the movie plays with, just like Wicker Man, which it is so heavily inspired by. Obviously, I can see now that I've seen Wicker Man. Mm-hmm. But both movies are playing with the audience's notion of who to root for. Now, Sergeant Howie is the hero. So you may not like it, but I think it's what makes The Wicker Man stand out from any other film. That first viewing, you side with Howie. He's our cipher. The whole story is told from his point of view. And from the beginning, I'm invested in the mystery that he's solving. Because it's more of a mystery film, honestly, than a horror film for the first, 3 quarters
And he thinks he's helping a young girl as well.
What happened to Rowan Morrison, this missing girl? But while you side with Howie, and he's the lead character, no question, It's the villagers that I like. Howie's a killjoy. He's a scold. The villagers are fun. They're cheeky. And they're also in on something together, and I want to be part of their secret club. Well, I read all these reviews.
I'm not criticizing those things, by the way.
No, me neither. But that's just it. It's more fun to be a part of the club that is sexually liberated. The sex never graduates to full out there deviant sex. It is just consensual adults having sex. Oh, they're nude in public, or they're having sex together in a dark field. The way that pagans did. This is all based on real pagan rituals. Sex is not on its face evil. Promiscuity is not on its face evil. The fact that the landlord's daughter, they're singing this song about her, and I was like, oh my God, she must be so embarrassed. This is so cruel. But then you see she's smiling, she's dancing with them, she's bumping her with their crotch, and she's enjoying this and having fun with it because there's no shame in being promiscuous. And the whole song is about a girl who sleeps around, and she's like, haha, yep, that's me. She has no reason to be ashamed, so why can't she just laugh along with everybody? No matter how much you might be bothered by that in your life and your culture or whatever, there's got to be a part of everybody that's like, oh, it looks like fun, though.
It does look like fun.
It does look like fun. A lot of reviews called the villagers creepy. I didn't really find them creepy. I found their behavior...
At the end.
Yeah, okay, at the end. And I found their behavior strange and unsettling at times. There's these little moments like the roach walking circles around the nail in the classroom, and the girl's naked jumping over the fire, and the way people give him these ambiguous answers all the time. And you know they're up to something, and you know you should be worried about it, but Howie sucks so much that you're like, I don't know, have fun with him, play around with him, show him who's boss. This guy's such a pill. They're blonde and fun and horny, and the movie moves along. You just grow to dislike Howie more and like the villagers more. Just like in Midsommar, the villagers are the actual villains. So we may like them, we may want to be on their side, and that's the trick that the movie plays on us. I imagine on a rewatch it would be really fun to identify all the ways Howie thinks he's piecing the case together when actually it's the community carefully leading him down a path.
They're grooming him.
Beyond grooming him, they're tricking him into doing certain things, into resisting Willow's come-ons, into putting on the fool's costume. All these things are prearranged. They want him to discover that Willow's still alive. There's the scene where they're in the tavern.
No, not Willow. Rowan.
Sorry, Rowan. There's a scene where they're in the tavern, and there's the missing picture there. And if you look carefully, you can see that the bartender, or I think it's the landlord, but he makes this point to move over and just lean on the wall right next to the missing picture.
Hint.
I did not pick up on this. I read about this. I certainly wasn't astute enough to pick it up the first time around. But obviously it's his little part in making sure that he notices the picture's missing. And
we rehearsed this all week. Get your cue, guy.
Yeah.
He's getting nailed that cue.
And the whole time, Howie thinks he's getting the better of them, but actually he's falling into their trap.
Apparently during the nude dance that we see during the day, the women are wearing bodysuits.
Yeah, that's kind of obvious.
I don't know if it's because they didn't want to do nudity or if it's supposed to be that it was cold. It probably was cold in the fall on a Scottish island. It isn't blatantly obvious, but yeah, it doesn't look quite right either. It's actually an interesting subtext because, yes, they're supposed to be naked. But it's funny that if you think about the filmmaking, they were being prudish in a way, if that was what it was. If the women said, I don't want to be naked, I don't blame them. I think if I was an actor, though, I don't think I'd have a problem with being nude. And, of course, guys are almost never nude in movies, especially down below the belt. But I admire the actresses like, well, Florence Pugh. This beautiful woman has shown off her body plenty of times. And she hasn't been acting that long. I think we've seen her nude in, I don't know how many movies. Margot Robbie has been nude a few times in movies now, I think, as well. Another 12 out of 10. So we said this movie takes place in the spring, even though it's filmed in the fall. But Howie tries to leave after he's been there for, I don't know, several days anyway, on May Day. And then his plane and the radio in the plane are damaged, so he can't go. And that's when we develop into the partying and the dancing and everything. I love the fact, and I am also going to criticize this, but I think it's more amusing than anything else. It's almost like a shark or something line in the remake, because there's a lot of absurdities in the remake. But this might be the biggest absurd scene in this movie. When the Rowan thing hasn't worked out, he found a rabbit in her grave when they exhumed the corpse. What's that all about? Well, we know it is now, but at that point you're thinking, what's that all about? But here's the thing. He falls asleep. How could you possibly be comfortable enough to fall asleep when you don't trust these people? Maybe not to kill you. You don't think it's going down that road exactly. But then doesn't he have a gun and he is thinking, I better defend myself? How could you ever fall asleep? Maybe it is the shark or something version in this movie. What is that doing there?
His behavior from the jump is the behavior of a man who's so confident in his own authority. He goes to this island. Clearly, everybody hates him. Everybody's giving him the runaround. And he still has the nerve to just act the way he acts. He bosses them around. He's not trying to win anyone's hearts or minds here. He feels very confident that they will all acquiesce to him because he has the power of the king.
He doesn't worry that they're going to hurt him, I guess. And it is mostly women on this island, I guess. There's plenty of guys, too. Isn't that true? Or is it a pretty good mixture? I'm thinking of the remake where it's almost entirely women. Certainly that matter in the story in that movie, anyway.
It's funny, I didn't really think to check, although even if it was 50-50... that would still make it seem like there's more women than guys because it's so unusual to see women in crowd scenes because for some reason in Hollywood they don't even cast women as extras.
This isn't Hollywood, but I get your point. Did you notice they had their own Stonehenge?
Yeah, but there are Stonehenges around. The famous Stonehenge is famous because it's massive and because it's so well preserved. But there's lots of other ruins. I'm pretty sure there's other Druid ruins throughout the UK. Much smaller structures or...
This one isn't very big, that's true. It's not the size of Stonehenge.
Because part of the Stonehenge is how did they do it? Nobody really knows how they did it.
We watched the movie well over a week ago. I don't remember exactly why I quoted the word blessed. But I think it's when Howie's blessed as he goes under the swords. Almost like it's a wedding type of thing. And the swords form a pentagram as well. Mm-hmm. So we already know they're pagans. Well, they're really proving it now by doing that. He finally finds Rowan, and she acts like, get me out of here, let's go. They go through some caves. He thinks he's helping her, and then they come out the other side. There is the Lord with, several other women. She runs right to him. Ah, you turncoat. In the remake, Cage goes over there more specifically, because this movie doesn't really explain why Howie goes there. The anonymous letter I was reading in Wikipedia. I read
about the anonymous letter. It's in the novel. The theatrical version, they cut out like 20 or 30 minutes so that they could send it as a B film. That's how they played it in America.
This cut isn't even 90 minutes. It's about an hour and 28.
We had to make a choice, and we generally...
I'm going to go with theatrical.
We always watch a theatrical version of a film.
Well, Close Encounters we didn't, I don't think. In Lord of the Rings, the only ones we have are the director's cuts. When we watched Fellowship for the original Top 100 project many years ago.
And in the case of those films, we had seen the theatrical cuts of those films. At any rate, there is a scene of him in Scotland where he gets the letter, where the whole impetus for him to go out there and seek out Rowan in the first place happens. It leaves you wondering at the beginning, but you just go, well, obviously somebody sent him over there to look for Rowan. It's inferred that something happened. And the novel is clear and the deleted scenes is clear. He
just went there because, he was assigned to go over there. In the remake, though, it's Cage's ex-girlfriend, I believe, who communicates with him, sends a letter probably, I forget exactly. And it's her daughter who's missing.
Personal connection. Yeah, I can see that.
In this
case, stakes are higher.
Yeah, and he cares more because of that alone. Also, they set this up that he has a tragedy where he relates to her. You don't really need that scene, but it's one of the few, it's not really a scare exactly, but it is a horrifying moment in the beginning of the remake. This one just slowly builds. This is a classic example of a movie that is 50 years old because it goes in a line up. There aren't these peaks and valleys like in Jaws or like The Exorcist the same year where you have plenty of scares. That also takes a while to get to them, though. I mentioned how, apart from the stuff in Iraq, there's some, actually in a lot of ways, there are more type moments in Iraq in the first maybe 10 minutes of that movie than there are in the rest of it. But after you get past that stuff, and it's not really truly scary, it's more just weirdness over there. But I think it's 40 minutes in before you really start seeing Reagan do anything at all devilish. But in this one, there's really nothing until the last maybe 15, 20 minutes.
Longer build-up makes better payoff, right?
Not criticizing. I'm just saying this is unusual in that sense that they don't really even have the scene like in the remake where this horrible car accident happens in the beginning and Cage is always remembering that. I think we see it several times throughout the storyline. A modern movie is going to have that moment where something huge happens to start a film.
Always,
and then go back to it,
Yeah, you always have to open with the big thing so that everybody's like, okay, well, I can't tell anybody this movie was boring because it started off like this. There's a time and place for that. We just recently rewatched The Invisible Man, the one that came out in 2020 with Elizabeth Moss. Excellent thriller. The best scene in the movie, actually, is the opening scene where she's escaping her relationship. That's not a spoiler. And I think it works excellently. I think that makes the movie better. It sets us up for the tension that builds throughout the rest of the film. So not to say that it's always a mistake, but it's funny. We covered The Conjuring earlier this month. A lot of people pointed out, wow, the build-up takes so long. But you compare Conjuring to a horror movie made in the 70s, or late 60s if it's Rosemary's Baby, Mr. Pedant, push your glasses up. Actually, so if you're watching a horror movie from then, it'll take the whole movie to build up to that scary moment. And you're not bored because it's beautifully shot, because the screenplay works. In the case of Wicker Man, like I said, this is actually really a mystery. And the mystery is what keeps you engaged because you're just so curious about what's actually happening here.
You say a mystery. Well, I said that on Friday the 13th, which I posted on Friday the 13th. The first one is a horror movie, obviously, but it's also a pretty good whodunit. And why are they doing it? She has a motivation, whether you agree with her. And I don't, of course, agree with her motivation at all. But the point being that...
I like how you're clarifying your position on this.
Well, it's just that everyone thinks of the slasher aspect. And Halloween was 2 years earlier, and it's a better movie. I covered that not that long ago by myself. But you don't ever wonder who it is. We know who is stalking the babysitters. And that's not bad, but Friday the 13th has about 90 minutes of who is doing this and why. And in Wicker Man, you've got the same kind of thing. As you say, it is a horror movie, but it is really more of a mystery.
Yeah, that's how you keep the audience engaged while you're building up to your horror moment.
Because the whole thing of finding Rowan does not matter.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't need to be found. A, she is alive, and B, she's in on it. Which is a pretty great twist. That was probably an incredible twist back then. 50 years ago, we've seen that kind of thing, I think, done plenty of times since, including the remake of this movie. But it's the kind of thing that doesn't seem as revolutionary now as it probably did then.
Yeah, that's a great point. I wish this movie had not been spoiled for me, but, you know, it's a 50-year-old movie. Somebody spoiled it for me. I can't be mad about it that I never got around to seeing it before I found out.
Oh, but you knew he was going to die in the Wicker Man.
I knew he was going to die. I didn't know Rowan was still alive, but it kind of started to become clear that they're messing with him, whether Rowan was alive or whether she never existed at all, because that was another option. I knew that it was all a ruse to get him there in the first place. Or maybe not, or he was there and he was being nosy. Actually, for the first half of the film, I thought, well, I guess he's there looking for this missing girl. And they go, well, wouldn't it be convenient to just use him as a sacrifice since we need to sacrifice anyway? Not really putting together that he was always meant to be the victim and that he was playing into their trap all along.
That is one of the great things about this. It isn't just accidental. Of course, why would that be that way?
And it's so disturbing. We're so trained to accept a certain kind of storytelling, and you start a film with a mystery, and then the audience is so trained to expect these beat-by-beat things, and we know that at the end he's going to solve the mystery, he's going to save the girl, or he's going to discover what happened to her, and he's going to get justice. And maybe it won't be pretty and tied up in the most perfect little bow, but when he's so confident that he's going to be fine, the audience, probably seeing this for the first time, was also pretty confident that he was going to be fine. And then the horror of turning that around and ending in the most horrible death you can imagine.
I think deaths could be a lot worse than being burnt. I would not want to be burned alive.
Let's not think about it too much then.
But when you're up that high, the smoke maybe would knock you out, even kill you before you even got burned. It would be hot, though, let's face it. It would get hot pretty fast.
I read Hilary Mantel's 3-part series about Thomas Cromwell. This is how I know that they burn people alive. And they have very languid descriptions of what it was like. And, of course, she's a writer, but she's a very devoted historical writer who likes to get her details right. It sounds pretty bad to me. I have these haunting images in my head from those books.
Well, I'm also picturing, say, witch burning type of thing, where they're just on the ground. One advantage he has is that they light the thing, 4 of them light the thing at the same time from below. That's why I say the smoke would maybe get to him first. That could be wrong, but if you're just tied to a pole on the ground and surrounded by a fire, you're going to light very fast. It's not going to be a slow progression with smoke that would maybe possibly take you out first.
I think often when people die, it's because they either die of smoke inhalation, like you say, like in house fires, that's very common, or you inhale the flames and you asphyxiate because your lungs burn up, and then you die fairly quickly and mercifully.
Yeah, so it's terrible, but I don't think it's necessarily the worst death you could have because of those reasons. Speaking of that fire, by the way...
Let's let your imagination go crazy. What's worse than that?
These thoughts are more horrifying than the movie is. Executives wanted Rain to stop the fire to save Howie. They wanted a happy ending. So let's say Robin Hardy says, I agree with you guys, let's do that. They could burn the guy the next day. They could try again. They
could take those swords that they made the pentagram with.
Stab him,
Stabby. You're still stuck in that Wicker Man. Where are you going to go? I can get a sword in there.
Rainstorm doesn't end this forever and ever. It's not a Simpsons episode. Why do we never try things twice? They would try to do it again later. By the way, what happens next for the movie? I'll get to that right now. Well, they clean up the ashes of the Wicker Man and then harvest their delicious apples.
Obviously, the crops do great because they sacrifice a person, a virgin.
It's going to work. Well, it's also months away from working.
Oh, boy, I want to be there in the fall when they have like a harvest celebration. It's going to be bananas. They're probably going to have bananas to go with those apples.
Maybe that too, yeah. Okay, it's not that simple because Howie is a cop and his colleagues must know he was going there to investigate the death of a young girl. Surely someone in authority will send a proper task force to find out what happened to one of their own. Although, I guess there will be no evidence he was ever there. They'll cover it up. And of course, his body is going to be ashes. And everyone will just deny they ever even saw him. Or what they more likely would do is say, yeah, he came. He was here for a few days. And then he left.
So easy. You sink the plane. And then...
No, maybe take it apart so no one could ever find it.
Okay, sure. But as long as you destroy the plane, then they're going to assume that that's how he died. There you go.
Right, he could have gone down in a plane crash.
Yeah.
And obviously they're all going to listen to the Lord and not say anything.
They fall in line. You know that they're all going to say what they got to say and do what they got to do. Yeah. They're convincing liars.
This is a movie about Scottish people that has no Scottish actors in the main roles.
Really?
Edward Woodward is mostly a TV actor going into this, by the way. He got 6 Emmy nominations in his career, mostly for The Equalizer, which I've never seen before. I think that came after this.
I loved The Equalizer.
Well, you've seen it, okay.
I was a kid. I should have never been watching it. And I don't think I understood it.
Was he a cop?
I don't know if he was a cop, but he got revenge for sexual assaults. I think that's what the show was about, but I only learned that as an adult because nobody explained to 6-year-old Bev what she was actually watching.
Isn't The Equalizer what the Denzel movies are called? Yeah, that's right. Talked about Lee's credits already. Oh, also the Tim Burton movies he was in. Did a lot of those. Diane Salento played Miss Rose. We didn't talk about her at all, but she got an Oscar nomination 10 years before for Tom Jones, which maybe we'll do one of these days because it won Best Picture and Best Director and everything. She was married to Sean Connery, for 11 plus years, and then she was married to Anthony Schaffer, who wrote this, for 16 plus years.
Yeah, that's right. They fell in love making this film, didn't they?
I don't know. Maybe. Probably. It seems like it makes sense.
I saw that.
Lindsay Kemp was in very few movies, but was in Velvet Goldmine. I didn't see many other credits that really stood out that much. Britt Eklund, of course, Peter Sellers' ex, did The Man with the Golden Gun the following year with Christopher Lee. He is the Man with the Golden Gun, and I think she's one of the Bond girls. And Ingrid Pitt is the librarian. She's the one, I think, right, that's teaching the kids, or is that the teacher? We saw the movie over a week ago.
I kept waiting for my voice to get better.
Yeah, right. But anyway, in class, they're teaching, or she's, maybe it's not her, but somebody, the teacher, maybe it's her, sorry, is teaching these kids about sex, which, of course, outrages him. And specifically, you hear talk about the penis. And you know how to make people not be obsessed with sex? Don't make them feel obsessed about sex by making it so taboo, especially kids. If you talked openly with them, they'd probably be bored of hearing you talk about it and not feel so compelled to do it.
And teaching somebody about anatomy is not the same as grooming them or whatever people want to describe this behavior as.
Yeah. So Pitt was in Dr. Zhivago. She's an extra in that. And also was in Chimes at Midnight, which we just watched just because we wanted to watch it not that long ago. The Orson Welles film he wrote, directed. He's the main character. He's Falstaff. So Robin Hardy directed this. He was a novelist more so. The only other movies he ever directed were The Fantasist. Don't know that. And I already mentioned The Wicker Tree. He was not interested in doing a sequel in the late 80s they wanted to do. So he did the spiritual sequel, The Wicker Tree, which I think was in the last maybe 15 or so years. I didn't write that down. I should have, I guess. Anthony Schaffer wrote this. He also did Frenzy for Hitchcock the year before, I think it was. Sleuth, that was definitely the year before. That's the Michael Caine and Olivier movie. And Murder on the Orient Express. He has a writing credit on that, which was the year after this movie. That was one hell of a stretch for this guy.
No kidding.
He is Peter Schaffer's twin. He's gay because he was involved with the composer, Paul Giovanni. The only composer credit that guy ever had, by the way. He was a musician and a playwright. Never did a score for anything else.
And how have we failed to talk about the music? People have described this not just as a horror film, as mystery, but also as a musical. Now, apparently the director's cut is a little more committed to the songs in it.
Yeah, there are plenty of songs.
But we have quite a bit of singing. We have this beautiful Celtic soundtrack that goes with the film. And it's like a pretty important part of it. And apparently the soundtrack was popular as well. As the film gained popularity, so did the soundtrack.
Giovanni should have composed more than just one movie. He's really good at it. And Schaffer based this on David Pinner's 1967 novel, Ritual. Peter Snell produced this, also did The Wicker Tree with Hardy, and a lot of TV movies. The film was 185-1. We got the DVD from the Toronto Public Library. And here's my maybe second biggest criticism of the whole film. It's not the film's fault, actually. It's just bad luck. But we had a lot of problems with the disc freezing. I thought we would have to just stop and maybe pay for this on YouTube or something like that. But then it would unfreeze. But we missed some of Britt Eklund's naked dance because of that. Come on, not here, not now. Freezing now. Cinematographer Harry Waxman also shot Swiss Family Robinson. That was a huge hit. That's a movie that no one probably ever remembers anymore unless they were a fan of it or something way back when. But it's on the short list for one of the biggest hits ever. I think it's in the top 150 or so of Box Office Mojo's top 200 adjusted for inflation films. He worked for a long time, though, long career. The editor, Eric Boyd Perkins. There's a lot of dissolves in this. You notice that? Way more dissolves than you usually see in probably any movie. Ton of transitions that way. And also he cut For your eyes only. I mentioned Man with the Golden Gun.
Oh, Bond connections, eh?
Surprising Bond connections. And, of course, Paul Giamatti composed. What do you think of the look? Well, the writing as well with that, with Schaffer, and directing with Hardy. The cutting, you just said you like the music.
Cinematography doesn't really sparkle for me.
The last scene it does, though.
Yes.
The last shot, of course.
But in general, maybe because it's all in Scotland, but there's a drabness to it. Maybe that has to do with a smaller budget as well, or just the age of the film, the fact that it was a B film, so it may not be preserved all that well.
By the way, you mentioned earlier about how much it made. This is why I couldn't confirm this, why I didn't write it down. It says the budget was £500,000, and the box office, though, is in dollars, so $393,000, which isn't very much, I guess, so it must have failed.
Yeah, it's kind of a cult film that picked up steam later. Do you like the look of the film?
I guess so. That was all right. I didn't really think this movie looked bad, but... Nope,
I wouldn't say it looked bad. It just didn't...
Because Nope, last week we covered that, and that's a movie that's a year and a half old. That looked unbelievable. I think Halloween did, too. This doesn't stand out like those did.
Yeah, the technicals, they show their budget. The dubbing's a little clumsy here and there. And
inexperienced filmmaker making it as the director.
Yeah, so maybe that's it. But the screenplay and the performances and just the guts of this film make up for all of that.
I said the Wicker Tree was out in the last 10 or 15 years. Yeah, it was 2011, so...
40 years apart, though, the films.
So last thoughts on The Wicker Man.
What a cool film, even after 50 years and with the remake and the spiritual remake with Midsommar. It still really stands alone as a very unique work of art. It made me feel things that I don't think I've felt before.
And Hot Fuzz, in a lot of ways, is a remake, too.
Of this movie?
Well, it's funny, but it's got some of the same things going on. The cult, we said already that Angel acts a lot like...
Yeah, you have a square
Woodward.
cop that comes in and tries to break up a cult. And
the greater good, the greater good.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, fine. Even people that are directly copying this movie have not managed to really get the spirit quite in the same way.
Yeah.
It's just truly one of a kind. And for any movie that's 50 years old, I think that says so much.
Yeah, it could have been fun to play Howie, but Woodward is good in the movie. It's not his fault that he's a drip that you wouldn't want to be around in real life. Doesn't deserve what happens to him, but it's a little harder to root for the guy when he's such a dick.
That's the point.
You're right. It's true. I'd say this movie has one of the most famous endings in horror history. Even the hated LaBute version makes pretty good use of the last few minutes when it's Nick Cage in The Wicker Man. There's not that much horror in this until the end, but the flick does deliver on weirdness and dread pretty much all the way through. It also has a sense of inevitability. The Summerisle people had a plan, and they executed it when they executed Howie.
Yeah, there's no real narrative tension if you know what's happening. The second or third time you watch this movie, you wouldn't have any narrative tension because everything's going exactly according to plan.
Yeah, I've seen it, I guess, at least twice now, and I knew it was going. Of course, the remake is pretty faithful, especially with the story beats. So I don't think it's scary, but I can see why it gets under somebody's skin. All right, that was our take on The Wicker Man. Next Monday, it will be the day before Halloween. What movie will get the prime slot this year? Well, it's not the greatest horror movie of all time, but it's the sequel to what the AFI does consider to be the greatest horror movie of all time, because they rank Psycho #1 on their top 100 thrills, so that means it has to be the greatest horror film of all time, according to them. But Psycho 2 is pretty good too, and that will be our podcast on October 30th. The coming attractions trivia for Psycho 2. A famous director who's still actively making movies is such a big fan of Psycho 2 that person prefers it to Hitchcock's original. That's saying a lot, isn't it?
Bold.
Who is that famous director?
All right, so for the answer to that question, check out next week's podcast about Psycho 2. You already know how to find us, but let me remind you to favorite or subscribe wherever you listen, which is also where you can find our archive of hundreds of episodes which are available for free. Is there a movie you'd like to hear us cover? Well, you can make a recommendation by leaving us a rating and a review. Or you can just leave us a rating and review because you like us, and that's a great way to help us reach more listeners and make us so happy. We're both on Twitter, or X,
Twitter
whatever you want to call it. I'm at Bev Ellis. Ryan is at MovieFeed51. Or maybe by now you would prefer to reach us on email, and that's great too. Have you ever seen podcast@gmail.com. You can also find our podcast on YouTube. Our channel is at HYES Ellis.
And you can comment there just like you could in an email.
Absolutely. And to enjoy freshly roasted premium coffee delivered straight to you in Canada or the US, please go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES and enjoy a 20% discount.
I don't know about you, but I could go for some apples right now. That or a barbecued cop. They must have eaten them. Why wouldn't you eat them?
Sure, babe. And cut.
It is a horror movie.